This video contains spoilers. Don't watch this if you haven't already seen the movie and don't want anything spoiled. I do have a spoiler-free version. You can go and watch that if you want to. So yeah, let's just jump into my spoiler-filled review of Spider-Man No Way Home. Okay, so obviously the thing everyone wants to know are Toby and Andrew in this, and of course they are. It's been leaked and rumoured so much. It would have been a disappointment if they wasn't, but even though they were in my cinema, there were still gasps and cheers when they showed up. I was worried that their arcs would be kind of ruined by this, or they wouldn't feel like their characters. And I don't think that's the case for them. In fact, I think that might have been the case a little bit for Tom's arc. The kind of revenge for Green Goblin kind of felt a bit tacked on there. The whole I'm gonna go kill Green Goblin, it just didn't feel like it fit. It felt like Tom's already been through this arc, or he'd already gone through it. He'd already gone through it earlier in the movie when Aunt May was saying with great power comes great responsibility, and then he decides, oh, I'm going to work with these other two Spider-Men. And then when it comes to it at the end, when he's like, oh, I'm going to kill Green Goblin, it just feels like he's already had that resolution that he's going to try and help everyone. So it did feel a bit off. Maybe there could have been a bit more foreshadowing with that when they were all going to the Statue of Liberty. Maybe they were like, oh, we're going to save all of them, and it kind of ominously kept on Tom for a bit just to build that seed of doubt in the audience, you know? There was, of course, the Matt Murdock cameo. He was only in there for a tiny bit, but it was still great to see. And of course, we've seen spoilers for episode 5 of Hawkeye. We've already seen that Kingpin is also here. So I am wondering who they're bringing through from the Netflix shows. I have this feeling that they're going to bring in Matt Murdock, Kingpin, but I don't really know about the others. I don't know how much relevance they would have. I definitely feel like they might recast Iron Fist, maybe as a variant, bring through another variant or something along those lines. It definitely feels like the ending of this movie was on purpose by Sony to build this fresh start for Tom Holland. But I do kind of like the ending because we're kind of going back to this fresh, friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. We're getting this kind of working class hero version of him because he has no money, the rent's due. He's got his homemade costume. It feels like almost a soft reboot, but I am wondering how that's going to work with Sony, you know? Is Sony going to be full creative control? Because the whole memory wipe thing makes me think if Sony's making all these movies, it just means he doesn't have to interact with the rest of the Avengers and everything now. So I'm not like too sure how I feel about that yet. I guess we'll just have to see in the future movies how that works. I love that we finally got the with great power comes great responsibility line. It's like the most iconic line for Spider-Man, and it's just great that we finally get that in this third movie of the trilogy. Of all the villains, Green Goblin is definitely my favourite here. Willem Dafoe just chews up all of the scenery that he's in. And then, of course, they build that kind of emotional connection for Tom when he kills Aunt May. So Tom has his vendetta against him. That moment where Aunt May dies was super emotional. I cried. I know there was a lot of people that did in the cinema next to me. That's probably the darkest moments in this Spider-Man trilogy in the MCU. I know Tom Holland had said this is the darkest movie that he's done for them, and I agree with that. I think Doc Ock has a good role in this as well. At some points, it does feel like he's almost a caricature of his character, but I think that kind of gets fixed when his chip is fixed. And of course, he has this kind of redemption arc like he does in his movies. I was worried that, you know, that arcs would be ruined and the characters wouldn't feel like themselves, but I feel like for the most part, the characters do feel like themselves. I feel like Toby does feel like a little bit off, but that's also because how much older he is now. It just makes sense because his character has aged a bit and he feels a bit more of like a mentor role. It's not huge, you know, when he shows up and he's like, oh, I feel like this guy needs me. I was really worried that he was gonna just feel another role of a mentor for Tom Holland, and it's just going to be that again, like we had with Iron Man and Mephisto, and then Tobey Maguire. But it doesn't really feel like that. I feel like it gets away with it pretty well. He doesn't feel like a mentor like that. It feels like they do give him advice and help him out, but it's not really on that same level as the Quentin Beck or the Tony Stark mentorship, you know? I did really like some of the banter between the three Spider-Men. Some of it felt like a bit too much, but it's great seeing all these interactions. You know, you want to see how they react when they find out he has organic web shooters, and them telling their stories about their versions of MJ and their versions of Ned. Toby talking about his best friend that died, and then Ned worried about all of this as well. Worried about turning into a villain. Also, part of the ending where he is forgotten by everyone, I was worried that when Ned walked into the cafe that Ned and MJ were going to be in a relationship now, but that doesn't seem to be the case. And I do really like how we see, Tom learning to... He was going to go in there with that script and that wouldn't have worked out at all, but he's trying to befriend them kind of organically. He has this way in now saying, oh, I'm going to MIT too. So he has a way to befriend them now. So we're going to get this kind of re-befriending of them. And it does seem like there is like a bit of a connection between him and MJ, it seems. I feel like from an outside perspective, that scene would have looked really weird. He's just like staring at her. I thought Ned maybe would have said something, or MJ would have said, what a weird guy, as he walked out, or something like that. So the end credit scene, I really wasn't expecting Tom Hardy to leave. I thought, oh, they're going to bring Venom into the MCU, but they do leave that little splodge of Venom, but actual Eddie Brock leaves, and I'm thinking they wouldn't not have Tom Hardy play him, right? So what I'm thinking is that splodge of Venom will be like, oh, I need to find Eddie, and he's like somehow connected to Eddie psychically, and he finds the MCU version of Eddie Brock, maybe also played by Tom Hardy, and that would give Tom Hardy a bit of a fresh start. I'd kind of hope they can change some of his character up a bit as well with that, so he's not playing this exact same version of Eddie Brock. He can play him a little bit differently. Doctor Strange didn't play as big as a part in this as I thought he would, but I'm kind of glad for that. He doesn't, again, fill this mentorship role. He's not just taking some of the spotlight away. He's there. He almost acts more like a plot device than he does a character in the film. His personality does have consequences for the film, but he's not like a main focus here. The focus is on Spider-Man, which I'm really glad of. I really liked the Ned Leeds being a wizard. I was wondering, if that is going to go anywhere, because obviously no one remembers who Peter Parker is, but does Strange still remember who Ned and MJ are? Could Ned learn more magic? That would be cool. I know in the comics he becomes like Hobgoblin, who is like this Green Goblin variant. He's like the successor to Green Goblin, I think. So it would be cool. I don't know if he will become a villain, but maybe because everyone's forgotten about Peter Parker, they could set that up somehow and he could use like magic in some way to be a villain. I don't know. That could be cool if they can pull it off right. As I said in my non-spoiler review, I think this is very much an event movie. It's a big scale movie and it feels a lot of this hype that you want it to feel, but kind of structurally it is a bit weak and a bit messy. I wasn't that convinced by the first half, if I'm honest, when he's going around and kind of collecting all of the villains. I was like, this is cool, it's cool to see, but there's not much going on here to make me kind of emotionally resonate with it. It's just like relying on our previous knowledge of these villains to get by. But then as soon as the scene happens where Green Goblin kind of flips and he tries to escape, that scene where we get the kind of dolly zoom effect, that Jaws effect, and just the spider sense going, that was super cool. Seeing this fear in Tom Holland's eyes was really great. And then all of that fight scene. The fight was a little bit hard to follow, I think, but I think that's partly due to the secrecy of the movie. They want to keep things, tight down, so there's probably some of that was CGI, and it made it a bit harder to film some of the action. But that whole thing that eventually led to the death of Aunt May, that was a great scene. And then, of course, the death of Aunt May I've already talked about. It just feels like that was kind of a turning point for me in the movie. And then after that, I was like super invested. I think a lot of the villains, how they interacted was cool. It wasn't exactly what I was expecting. Sandman shows up and he's helping Peter, and then he flips and is against Peter. A lot of the way these characters bounce off of each other worked really well. Seeing a lot of these villains, they kind of flip-flop between helping and wanting to be helped and things like that, and it really works. And I think the overall message for this movie is really strong for a superhero movie. It's about what does it mean to be a hero, and it means to save people, not just physically save people, we see that all of the time, but help them emotionally as well. And that's what Aunt May was always doing, helping the people at the shelter, and that's what her message was. With great power comes with great responsibility. You help one person and then that's a knock-on effect, and you help everyone. Stopping a villain is just stops them once, but if you save the villain like they did here, they save them, they convert them back, they help them out as people, that stops so much more down the line. It's almost a commentary on kind of rehabilitation over punishment, if you get what I mean. If you lock someone up, they're going to have so much resentment. Once they get out, they just resort back to crime. But if you properly rehabilitate someone, they can then go on and be a functioning member of society, help other people. It's just kind of like a knock-on positive effect. So I really like that message in this movie. I feel like that's a very strong point for this. I feel like that's an aspect that the MCU doesn't do that well, to be honest, showing them as heroes and saving people. Obviously, we see them save people, but we never see the direct consequences of them saving people. It's always kind of bigger scale, so they save the whole city, but we don't see the impact of that on an individual level, so I really did like that here. So yeah, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this. If you did, consider leaving a like or a comment. And if you really loved it, be sure to subscribe to keep up to date for all the future uploads. So yeah, thanks for watching. Bye.